Hey, my name is Akash Thakkar,
And I'm Ryan Ike.
and this is
Oh no!
How to Thrive as a Creative During the Calamity. So before we get into anything, let's start with a little story. Those of you who were born or lived in North America for a really long time, you probably know about Niagara Falls, which is a huge set of waterfalls that spans the border between USA and Canada. If you're born anywhere near the border, you have to go. It's like a tourism rite of passage. But in the 1960s, they turned it off. A corps of army engineers came together and actually shut the waterfalls off because they wanted to see if they could give it a facelift and repair stuff around it. So they took one of the biggest waterfalls in the world and just shut it off. So they put up a bunch of stuff, a bunch of barricades to block it, and took something that had massive momentum and massive force behind it and just made it pause. And that sort of situation is kind of what we're dealing with right now. Whether you had tons of momentum before 2020 or not, a lot of things are on hold. A lot of things are being paused, for lack of a better word. And when so much is happening in the world, so much tragedy and turmoil and just BS is going on, we as creatives tend to wonder if things are ever going to continue, if they're ever going to get back to normal, if they're ever going to be better again. So hopefully through this talk, we can do what the engineers did with Niagara Falls after it got paused. They released it and everything went back to normal again. And hopefully we can give you some ideas on how to get your way back to some degree of creativity, productivity, happiness, focus, calm, whatever it may be. If we can help you even 1%, then that would be amazing. So let's get into who we are.
Again, I'm Ryan, and I'm a composer and sound designer who's worked on things like West of Loathing, Reigns, Game of Thrones, and Where the Water Tastes Like Wine.
And I'm Akash Thakkar. I do sound design for video games. I've worked on games like Destiny, Hyper Light Drifter, Concrete Genie, and a bunch of others. And I also do a lot of public speaking in and out of the game industry to help creatives thrive, especially in times like these. So in this talk, we're going to be covering two kind of main broad topics. The first is staying sane and focused during all of this. And the second is staying or becoming creative. So for those of you who have a creative vocation that you already do, bringing it back into your life, making it more of a focus and making it so that it becomes a centerpiece of your life again if it did indeed fall away during all of this stuff that's going on, which is completely understandable. So with so many people being hit hard over and over again all over the world, how should we even stay sane? How should we stay focused? How should we even stay creative or thoughtful or imaginative?
If you're anything like me, and unless you've melted a plastic cutting board and destroyed your mom's oven trying to bake a Totino's party pizza, you're not like me, you're better. But let's pretend. If you're like me right now, it feels like you're constantly being pulled between the desire to be productive, to live a balanced life, and to help others during this impossible time, all while tending to what seems like a fresh personal or national or global disaster literally every day. Being a creative freelancer is fucking hard, and keeping yourself in a healthy mental place where you feel like you have all these factors under control can be difficult when the world doesn't feel like it's falling apart. So while what we're talking about here is always important for what we do, it's even more vital in this incredibly challenging moment. See, 2020, as it turns out, is kind of like being trapped under a car next to a shrieking anthropomorphic warthog monster who really wants to show you pictures of his trip to Graceland. It fucking sucks. You don't really understand how it happened, and you have no idea when it's going to be over. So what we'll be talking about here are ways that you can develop a healthy mentality around your life as a freelancer, and then expand that mentality to help you not only survive this impossible situation we're all in, but thrive in it and thrive beyond it.
So another point I'd like to bring up is all about managing news and social media. And there's so much research that shows that if we limit our exposure to certain kinds of news and social media, we become happier, we become more sane, we become more focused. And that's not really surprising to anybody, but yet so many of us engage with it because frankly, it's addictive. They want it to be addictive. They want it to actually make us angry because that's an addictive emotion. And we want to keep clicking and doom scrolling and making things worse and worse and worse for us. So one thing I'll say is that you don't need to stay up to date on everything. Yes, catch up every so often, but you don't need to be watching the news 24/7 or scrolling Twitter 24/7 to see what the trending stories are every single hour of every single day. Yes, of course, you can catch up, you can do what you need to do, but just checking on the news constantly just makes things worse for you and makes it harder for us to act and harder for us to really do much of anything if all we're doing is doom scrolling all the time. So obviously we limit our exposure to that, but the main thing is not watching mainstream media. Now to this audience, I don't think that's going to be too tough of a sell because we tend to be a little more savvy than our weird uncle on Facebook who's posting conspiracy theories all the time, but it's just something to keep in mind that mainstream media makes its money off of making you and us angry. That's how they make their money. And it's something that we do want to avoid day to day because frankly, we don't want to stay informed from them if it means we're seeing it through a lens of complete pessimism and in a lens that makes it so that they make money off of other people's, frankly, misery. And when it comes to social media, don't be afraid to just block, unfollow, and mute everything and everyone. My Twitter, I've blocked basically every word in the English language and it is pure and clean. But one thing I will tell you to do on Twitter, which has been massively helpful, on the right-hand side, there's like a trending news sort of section. And I've changed the country of that from the US, which obviously you all know is a garbage fire, and I changed that to Saudi Arabia. I don't speak Arabic at all, and I have no idea what's going on over there. So now when I see a bunch of news articles over on the right, instead of just a bunch of US nonsense, I see a bunch of Saudi Arabian news that I can't even read. So it makes it so it doesn't even permeate into me and cause me to get angry and doom scroll and make my day worse and worse and prevent me from becoming more and more creative and being able to serve people like you. So that's just a fun little tip for you.
So Akash is absolutely correct about finding ways to be more choosy and careful about your exposure to news without completely checking out. I'm someone who really inhales political news because I really care about those issues and how they're affecting people and the world at large. But I only got good at limiting my consumption to it this year, going from kind of binging on it and then feeling horrible for days to just checking in every now and then. And it's still awful, but then I feel a lot healthier and happier and able to do my job because I'm limiting my consumption. But what if you're someone who feels that limiting your exposure to all the horrible things going on and all the awful things happening to people will also limit your ability to help? How can you be a good ally if you don't know what's going on all the time? This is something I worry about a lot, but there's a huge difference between staying healthily informed so you can pitch in and do what you can as an ally, and taking in so much depressing news that you're basically Dumbledore at the end of the Half-Blood Prince when he's drinking like that huge bowl of poison. A book I found out earlier this year was actually written by a cute dog who learned to use a typewriter and has no loud and regressive opinions about anyone's gender identity whatsoever. So, say it's not all bad news. The difference between hurting yourself and being healthy so you can help others is to take in all the horrible news tactically. Limit your time with it, but when you are engaged in catching up with what's going on in the world, note the causes that you care about, the people being hurt or disadvantaged, animals being abused, environmental causes, education, the arts, whatever it might be. Then I recommend scheduling a set amount of time every week. 20 to 30 minutes is fine. Can be more or less as you need or want. And set aside that time to actually see what you can do to help. You can devote that time to researching and donating to charities, supporting the things you care about. Even $5 to $10 is really helpful, especially if you have the space to do a recurring monthly sort of thing. You can sign petitions and spread them around. You could write a blog post highlighting an issue that you feel isn't getting enough representation. Options for helping in person are, of course, limited right now. But if you're able, a lot of homeless shelters, women's shelters, and animal sanctuaries are actually offering socially distanced ways to drop off donated items or supplies, or even volunteer while still being mindful of COVID and keeping yourself safe. You can do more personal acts of service too, from checking in on friends and family to see how they're doing, especially ones who are more isolated, to just doing a chore or making a meal so an overworked or overstressed spouse who's also suffering from the world at large doesn't have to. If turning away from the news, even partially for your own health, feels like turning a blind eye to the chaos going on in the world right now, setting aside just a little bit of time every week to provide what assistance you can is a game changer. Because now suddenly you're not just a bystander watching as a train careens towards the edge of a broken bridge. For a few moments every week, you're Spider-Man, perched on the engine and casting out webs trying to slow it down. No single web is going to stop it, but altogether, over time, you can lend a lot of physical and mental well-being to others while still preserving your own.
Now, when it comes to asking for help, That's okay. That's one thing that we really want to hammer home here is that's like the most okay thing in the world. Asking for help is actually a very noble thing to do instead of keeping it all inside, because no one can help you unless they know that you need something from your friends, your family, a professional, whatever it may be. And one thing we do want to make very clear is that you're never a burden if you reach out, even if it's something that you feel isn't a big deal. Like maybe you're just dealing with sickness of a pet or something like that. And compared, quote unquote, to the rest of the world, you may think, oh, but that's not so bad. I'm not dealing with something as bad as everyone else. That may be true in some level, but also if you're feeling it, if it is sad, if it is getting in the way of your day, if it is making it so that you can't function as well as you were, then that is worth reaching out for. It is a-okay to ask for help, even if you feel that the thing that you want help with isn't as big as other things in the world. Even reaching out, people will be happy to help you. Friends are thrilled to help you in those sorts of circumstances.
So 2020 feels like being dragged to see Cats in theaters, except the projector doesn't work right. So the movie only moves at 1/4 speed, and then it freezes right when Idris Elba is spinning butthole first into a midair cartwheel. And during this trying time, I felt overwhelmed, unprepared, or just not able to handle things a lot. And 99% of the time when I felt that way, asking for help, whether that was a friend, a colleague, my wife, someone I just knew decently well on social media, that solved it. We developed this unfortunate habit of trying to do everything ourselves, and then when that doesn't work, when it falls down, we try to fix it ourselves. And you'd be surprised how often simply asking someone for help just is the answer. If you're worried about bothering people, remember that, like I mentioned earlier, a lot of people are out there actively looking for ways to help, whether it's globally or nationally or, just interpersonal. And the person who helps you might end up feeling really good to have gotten a chance. So next time life feels like being trapped in a slow motion showing of Cats, instead of enduring it, just consider asking the guy at the concession stand if he'll just turn off the projector for you. Like, I'm sorry, I can't do it. Judi Dench is a cinematic treasure, and they made her look like a fucking monster, and I just can't look at it anymore. And Julio's got you. He's going to turn it off and make the bad movie go away, and you're good. So give it a try. So let's talk about the flip side of that coin, helping other people. As I talked about a bit earlier when we touched on trying to be a good ally right now, a lot of us are seeing how difficult things are for our friends, family, strangers, etc. And we want to do what we can to help. And that's wonderful. And we absolutely should. But a key thing to remember is not to let your desire to help others turn into self-loathing and negative thoughts when you can't. Sometimes we're just not in a position to do much for others. Absolutely. Donate, volunteer, raise awareness of important issues, start a podcast or a video series to raise awareness, whatever it is that you can do to help. But if your life just doesn't allow for those things right now, and at times everyone's doesn't, take that time to focus on you and what you need. If you catch yourself feeling bad that you can't do it all, remember that, you can't. Nobody can. Trying to keep your own work and personal lives balanced is already difficult enough without beating yourself up for not taking care of everybody else on your own.
So yeah, even if you do want to be a force of good and change in the world, you still need to take care of yourself so that you can take care of other people. Now, you've all heard of self-care. We've heard those words put together a trillion times. But I think there's a little bit of murkiness when it comes to learning about self-care and performing self-care on ourselves. When we do practice real, true self-care, it leads to better creative output, it leads to being rested, it leads to just feeling better overall. But we tend to confuse self-care with self-indulgence. So when we think of self-care, many of us tend to think things like, oh, I had a bad day, something happened, something got in the way, I was late for something, whatever it may be, I'm gonna eat 40 donuts. That's not really self-care, that is more self-indulgence. It doesn't really help us out of the situation that we're in, or it doesn't prevent future bad situations from happening as much as we can possibly control that. True self-care is doing something that will prevent some sort of problem or help us out in a situation in the future down the line, whether it be reading, learning, watching a helpful YouTube video, talking to a friend, talking to a parent, talking to a relative, whatever it may be. That's real self-care. But often we tend to mistake that sort of self-care with things like doom scrolling, getting sucked into social media, overeating like effing crazy, even though I love donuts, I could eat 40 in one sitting, no problem. Those sorts of things don't actually help us, and often we feel worse after the fact.
So a good way to practice truly restorative self-care is to pause and really think about what are the things that give you energy. When was the last time you looked up from doing something that wasn't work and you realized that more time had passed than you thought? Now, I want to make clear, this doesn't have to be meaningful, just restorative for you specifically. So you don't have to learn to meditate or scale mountains in your free time unless those specific things give you energy and you want to. If taking up soap making and creating custom fragrances for all your friends causes you to get so lost in it that you don't realize what you've done until you've entombed yourself inside a Bath and Body Works of your own design, I mean, that's great. Counterpoint, if binging 8 episodes of Selling Sunset helps you recharge because watching Christine the Human Drama Tornado put on a pair of neon green heels and then ruin 18 friendships before breakfast makes you feel like you can do anything, go for it. The trap we fall into is that we spend our limited free time on things that don't recharge us. Playing a game we're not feeling anymore, picking up a hobby because we've been made to feel like that's what we should be doing right now. So think about what restores you, what gives you that energy back, and lean into it.
So let's summarize this whole staying sane section. So number 1, make sure you manage your exposure to news and social media because that will help you quite a bit, even just that alone. Number 2, you can be there for others without draining yourself. You do need to take care of yourself so that you can take care of others. And number 3, you want to be intentional with your self-care. You don't want to just go into self-indulgence. Some of that's totally fine. I'm not saying eating 40 donuts is always bad because I've done it. We've all done it. But we don't want to always go down that path when it comes to taking care of ourselves.
So we've talked about how to care for yourself, how to care for others. So let's switch to talking about something that might feel even further out of reach right now, which is how do we make stuff? I've talked to a lot of fellow musicians, artists, programmers, writers since this year started, and a common dark thought that we're all kind of having is it even worth it? People need healthcare, they need housing, they need clean air and water and a hopeful future, and it just doesn't feel like my art matters now, does it? And the short answer to that question, that I can already feel some of you saying along with me, is Animal Crossing. Forgive me, I don't remember who, but I heard someone say that game probably saved lives this year, and as silly as that sounds, I think it's true. It gave people living in this scary, uncertain world a place where they could feel like they were in control, a place that was cute and kind and colorful, and you could make it into whatever you wanted. It's a place where when we feel completely isolated, we can still hang out with our friends and family and feel that connection. A place where my goddamn turnips never sell for more than 46 fucking bells. Tom, what do you want from me? Have I not given you everything? Sorry. Inherent capitalism aside, a game about cute animals did that for people in a time of unprecedented crisis. Art is how we impact the world, given what we do, and you don't know what effect yours is going to have, like what solace it's going to bring people. So it absolutely matters, and I would argue it matters now more than during normal times.
So yeah, by not giving up, we're actually able to help others. Like Ryan was saying with Animal Crossing, when people are trapped at home during a pandemic, what are they engaging with? They're engaging with the work that creative people are making. If it wasn't for that stuff, people would be way more bored and way more worse off than they are now. So thankfully, we have creative people who are still creating despite all the stuff that's going on. And I hope that's going to be you as well.
So remember, you never really know what comfort or escape or insight someone else will get from your work. And more importantly, you don't get to decide that for them. If you quit just because you assume people will have no use for what you're making right now, that's exactly what you're doing. So how do we muster up the energy to actually be creative when it's just the final act of Ghostbusters happening outside your window all the time? And no, Sigourney Weaver's not there, so it's basically pointless. Well, you don't have to make a huge masterpiece in one go. That's really important. Give yourself permission to start small. Remember that 10 minutes of creativity a day, just 10 minutes, is literally infinitely better than nothing at all.
And when we say start small, start really small. Even if you've fallen off of a habit that you used to have, rebuild it in really small chunks. And you can use something that's called tiny habits, which is proven in psychological research to bring habits back up to speed or to start new ones completely from scratch. And a tiny habit is really simple. All a tiny habit is doing something so laughably small every single day that it's impossible not to do. So for example, let's say you play guitar and you want to get back into playing guitar. Well, instead of saying, okay, I'm going to practice 6 hours a day, every single day, I'm going to get back to it, I'm going to get into it. No, that doesn't work. We've all tried that. It doesn't work. Instead, we say to ourselves, okay, I'm going to play one chord. And that's it. That's it for the entire day. If you play one chord, if you do one push-up, if you walk around the block or take 2 steps outside, whatever it may be, you win. And of course, the funny thing that will happen is that you play one chord, you do one push-up, you start to think, I can do way more than that. That's stupid. I want to do way more. It makes it much easier to go further when we start with a very small goal in mind. And I recommend you do this for literally any habit that you want to build. Start unbelievably small to the point where you think it's almost pointless to do that thing. That's the right size of tiny habit to start with.
And let's say you're not able to improve yourself at all. Let's say you couldn't write one more word than you did the day before, get down one more line of code, compose one more note. If you literally haven't improved at all since the last time you tried, that's okay too. You just forgive yourself and you try again. You will get that snowball rolling as long as you don't stop because you didn't see progress from one day to the next. So what have we discussed? Well, for one, your art could help someone a great deal without you ever really knowing how or where or why. People need that kind of thing now more than in peaceful times. So you making what you make is arguably more important now than it normally is.
And doing next to nothing is still better, infinitely better, than doing nothing at all. And your productivity doesn't relate to your worth as a person. Just because you may be on hold, you may be pausing, you may be taking some rest, you may be helping others, whatever it may be, that doesn't mean you're a worse person for not creating all the time. That's not what we're trying to say here. What we're trying to say is that if you do want to get back into that, if you do want to help others, if you feel you have the capacity to do that, here are some ideas on how you start.
All right, a couple final takeaways before we close up. I think it's really important to remember that these times won't last forever. I'm not saying that racial injustice or political upheaval or a global pandemic is just going to disappear. But people are fighting against these things, and they're going to keep fighting against these forces. And over time, these things probably won't go away, but they are going to get better. Remind yourself that the skills you're developing right now during this extremely challenging time aren't just useful now. They're going to serve you the rest of your life, whether things are crazy out there or not. You're likely going to look back on all this and say, it was awful. It sucked. There was something about Idris Elba's taint flipping through the air. I don't really understand the analogy he was making in that particular moment, but the point is it was really bad and I came out stronger because of it. And now I'm more capable of being a better, more resilient creative who is more capable of helping themselves and of helping others.
Now, as shitty as this year is for a lot of people, these sorts of hard times can really shape us into just a powerful Mjolnir that we can use to crush all of our enemies in the future. But in all seriousness, it does make a big difference for those of us who do power through it as best as we can in whatever way is healthy for us, whatever that may look like for you. That will make us better people, better able to help in the future, better able to deal with hard times in the future, and better able to stay creative, give relief to others, and even ask for help of others as well.
Oh, one more thing. Please, if you have follow-up questions or other unrelated questions, or you just want to say hi, please reach out to us. We always offer, and no one ever does it, but we really are happy to help. So yeah, feel free to hit us up if we can do something for you.
Like Ryan said, get in touch, please. So many people come to our talks and then say, oh, I didn't want to email you and bother you. No, here's our contact info. Please get in touch. We are happy to speak to you further. So thank you so much for coming out. Thank you for watching our talk. We really, really appreciate it. Again, please get in touch and we'll talk to you soon.